Go ahead.
I'd like to call the meeting to order and ask that the clerk lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much and welcome. We have approval of the agenda in front of us. If I could have a motion and second that the agenda of the January 10th, 2017 meeting be approved as submitted.
Second.
Any conversation, questions? All those in favor? Thank you. We also have an approval of a consent agenda, that the board approve the following consent agenda: minutes of December 6th, acceptance of recommendations from the Committee on Special Education, acceptance of recommendations from the Committee on Preschool Special Education, acceptance of recommendations from the Superintendent for personnel changes, request to approve recommended bidders, and additional recommended bidders in the agenda. If I could have a motion and a second that the board approve the consent agenda.
Second.
Any questions on the consent agenda? All those in favor? Thank you. You have in your packet and have, I'm sure, reviewed the treasurer's report. If I could have a motion and a second that the treasurer's report, including the cash report, general fund cash report, general fund revenue status report, general fund budget status report, school lunch fund cash report, and school lunch fund revenue and expense budget for the month ending October 31st, 2016 be approved.
Second.
Any questions on the treasurer's report? All those in favor? Thank you. And we do have a special report. Dr. Putnam?
Yes, we have with us today Marty Morrow. I'll have her come up, and she's going to go through the Medicaid Compliance Plan recertification. You may remember at the last board meeting we approved this. Marty was going to be here, but she's a new grandma, and so we let her go see that new baby, and she's here today to go through the special report with us.
Good evening. I'm Marty Morrow. I'm replacing Sue Coomer as Medicaid Compliance Officer for Penfield. So I am going to review with you the Medicaid Supportive Health Services Program, Medicaid and Education. This is the New York State program that enables school districts and counties to access federal money for medically necessary related services provided to Medicaid-eligible students with disabilities. So there's 3 different components to that. One is that they are receiving related services that are funded under that program. One is that they are Medicaid eligible, and one is that they are a student with a disability. We have a compliance committee consisting of Barbara Gregory, our Assistant Superintendent for Human Resources, Scott Dreschler, who is our Pupil Services Director and Special Education Director, Bill Maloney, who's our District Treasurer, and myself. We have quarterly meetings to review alerts and best practice, and review our compliance plan, which you had in your packet, as well as there's a summary of the 2016 Medicaid alerts in there. If you have any questions on those, you can refer to them. I just kind of briefly summarize them for your packet. We are supposed to make you aware of any need to report waste, fraud, or abuse. If you feel the need to speak to anyone about any concerns, Barbara Gregory is the person to contact. There's her information there. And also, you could speak to Dennis Rosen, who is the Medicaid Inspector General with the Bureau of Fraud allegations. So there's that information, and that's also in your PowerPoint. There's a number of services. These are the services that we are able to be reimbursed for, and of all of these, the first three are the only ones that we actually submit, because most of these services they have so many regulations that are more fitted to a doctor's office. And so the first three, speech, physical therapy, and occupational therapy, are really the only three that are cost-effective and fit in the way that school districts provide services. We also have to comply with IDEA regulations, which means that we have to send written notification to parents about accessing theirs or their child's public insurance and benefits. And so we send that out to them once a year, and they have to, at one time, reply with a written consent for us to be able to access their benefits. And then once we get that, then we can bill for that service. So if we don't get their consent, we can't be reimbursed for those services. Along with that, another requirement is that we have doctors or individuals who order, prescribe, refer, or attend services payable by the fee-for-service Medicaid program. They have to be enrolled in that program. And so our speech-language pathologists are all enrolled. Any doctor that prescribes a service that isn't enrolled, we can't bill for that service that's provided. All these regulations. Qualification that has to be met for a student to receive speech-language therapy. The service has to be provided by a speech-language pathologist who is registered and licensed, has an NPI number, and if they are teachers, speech and hearing handicapped, or teachers, students with speech and language disabilities, they can also provide the service, but it has to be under the direction of a speech-language pathologist. The same type of requirements apply to both physical therapy and occupational therapy. The service must be provided by a physical therapist who's licensed and registered with an MPI number. And a physical therapy assistant may provide the service if they're under the direction of a physical therapist. And there's regulations around that. They have to take notes and observe them and follow the guidance for that. And occupational therapy is the same way. A therapist has to be licensed and registered with an MPI number. And a certified occupational therapy assistant can also provide the service under the direction of an occupational therapist. The MPI number, if you're wondering what that is a national provider identifier. And so that's a requirement of HIPAA that is used in every healthcare service that utilizes HIPAA standards. And so it's basically a 10-digit number that doesn't provide any information about the provider. It keeps them protected, and it keeps us protected. And if you have any questions about that process, there is a link in the PowerPoint. The exclusion lists are lists of individuals who may be charged with fraud, abuse, or waste of the Medicaid program. And so these lists help us to be able to know who not to work with for services provided to our students. We use a system called K-Systems that goes through any of our employees, any of our providers, and checks to see if there's a match of any kind of people that might be on those lists. If anybody has a similar name or birthday, they will pull up on a list, and we go through and confirm that those people actually are not the people that are either employed by Penfield or providing a service or writing a script for the students. These are a list of different glitches that could occur on any claims that we submit for reimbursement of services. And fortunately, we have systems in place that do checks on the notes from sessions that providers write to make sure that they're compliant with Medicaid. So any of these things could make a note ineligible for reimbursement. And so we use Medicaid processing through Kinney, and that system has 40-some-odd checks against all the notes that are written to make sure that they meet the number of minutes that the student should be receiving services, shows progress, and any number of things that comply with that system. And then we're able to bill for it. And that's about the extent of it. Yes.
Barb, go ahead.
Marty, you did a super job, because I know from experience as a licensed speech language pathologist, Medicaid issues have not, they're not always easy to explain, but you did a very nice job.
Oh, thank you.
But I also have this one question. Being that I was a BOCES speech language pathologist who worked with students from all over Monroe County, and we used IEP Direct.
Mm-hmm.
The students who are Penfield students who go to outside providers, how does that come back to Penfield, and how does that, because I know that we had to write notes
Right.
on each
That's
one of
a great
those.
question. So we have the ability to pull those notes out of IEP Direct. In our system, we share those documents with the providers, and then it filters over to us. So then we submit those. We keep them on file in our system, and then we submit a brief entry of that into Kinney so that all of our claims are also in Kinney.
So then you have to then put everything into the Kinney management.
That is one of the things that we're working on streamlining right now.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Board members, Elisa.
Hi.
Hi.
Last year, we've had a conversation, I think, several years in a row about kind of what the cost benefit is for this, because it's so much time on the part of our speech language pathologist and all the glitches. And I think Sue had said the processing is several years behind. Do we have any idea what that's looking like at this point?
Yeah, we have made some advances, I think, in streamlining some of that. The notes are what they would expect to write for any encounter. We keep track of who they need to write notes for so that it minimizes the amount of effort that they have. And we are looking at that one last piece of streamlining the notes so that it's nothing that makes any extra effort for anyone. The cost effectiveness, I think, is going to continue to be evaluated. There was one other thing I was going to say that we were considering. It's going to be a little bit of a process because I'm just transitioning into this. So I am working with our team to make sure that we're not missing anything in that transition. So we do hope to improve on that.
If I could, one of the things that Marty's recommended, she touched on it, but I thought I'd say it a little more explicitly, is we started with K-Systems, the Kinney service, because they really got there first when schools started to move into this Medicaid world, and they've done a very good job. I mean, they're quite expert in it. They know how it works. IEP Direct, which we use for tracking our special education students, the IEPs and so on, was sort of a Johnny-come-lately to the Medicaid world. But they've been there, but they've been doing it for quite a while. BOCES is using it. It seems well regarded and well accepted, and it would certainly streamline not just for the BOCES providers, but for our providers as well, because they're interacting with IEP Direct for our special education needs. Wouldn't it be nice if it was the same thing for Medicaid? So Marty's recommended and we've accepted that we move in that direction. We just have to figure out timing and how that works and budget and when do we make those transitions and how does that look. And so it's a little early in the process, but I do think we're going to make that move. And I think it'll improve things a little bit. The only concern there, I think, is that, Kinney does have a great deal of expertise. This is one of those areas where, it's a medical model that a school district's participating in, and we're just really not used to that. It's hard. The rules are quite strict, and in our world, in the world of SED, they allow for the possibility of human error. You made a mistake. You should fix that. Okay, we will. And there might be consequences to your error, but they don't assume ill will. In the Medicaid world, there's fraud and not fraud. And if it's wrong, it must be fraud. So it just raises the stakes to that. And so we're moving in the direction. We just want to make sure it's the right move. We want to make sure that we're as locked down as we can be, because we just have to be in this. The reimbursement has reduced through the years. It was once, to us, close to $500,000. It's now around $150,000, something like that. So it's not inconsequential, but it's also not $1 million. So, we're going to continue to evaluate it every year.
One other quick thing, too, is that the state is changing the bureau that processes that, and so there's a little bit of change going on there that may eventually turn into something better than what it has been. One of the things is the turnaround time is supposed to be immediate now, as opposed to being like 30 or 90 days. And they did have a freeze on the eligibility list, and that opened up over the summer, and so we've gotten updated eligibility lists and things like that. So there are things that are being moved along.
Any other questions? Okay, well, thank you, Marty. We appreciate the update. Look forward to hearing more.
Thanks, Marty.
Okay, this is our visitor speaking time, where time is provided within our agenda for residents to bring concerns and comments to the board. Comments should not be related to any particular individual or the specifics of negotiations, since that's not proper to discuss these in a public session. And we have a form to fill out prior to the start of the citizens' comment period to give to the district clerk. It is expected that speakers will limit their comments to 5 minutes or less, and the board reserves the right to limit the total amount of time spent on the citizens' comment period based on the length of our agenda. We also encourage written communication to the board as well. And we do have an individual. Is it Jim? Is it Ebmeyer or Elmeyer? Ebmeyer from 2020 Baird Road in Penfield. Jim, if you wanted to come up and sit at the table, and you wanted to speak on school property maintenance.
Yes, thank you for the opportunity. We live at 2020 Baird Road, which is essentially across the street from the library community center, which, when we moved there, was an elementary school within this district. And we've been there for over 50 years. Our 3 kids went through the Penfield district and graduated, and now they're off, of course, through college and doing various kinds of jobs. The reason I came tonight was one of the things about living by the school property is that the maintenance of school property is the school responsibility, school district's responsibility. But one of the trees across the street from our house And on the school property, next to the fence that separates the community center property from the school property, is a tree. It sheds thousands of these seed pods, and they're all over the place. I don't believe it's the responsibility of taxpayers who live around school property to have to pick up crap like this that originates on school property. And I called the district office back in November about this and got some gal there, okay, fine. Well, nothing ever happened. So if you look at this tree, and there's only one tree that yields these seed pods, but it's generating thousands and thousands of them. And since the school district stopped doing any kind of lawn maintenance back in probably late October or whatever, the leaves from the trees on school property blow whichever way the wind is blowing. And in this particular case, since I live west on the east side of Baird Road, westerly winds blow all this kind of crap in our direction as well as our neighbors. And if you were to walk by this one tree, it's very close to the fence that separates the parking lot at the library and the school property where there's a football field or soccer field, whatever else. You'll see thousands of these things lying on the ground. So what I would really urge the district to do is a proper maintenance of the school property and not throw it on the responsibility of the taxpayers who live adjoining school property. And as I look across the street to that one single tree, there are thousands of these things still there that haven't blown in on my yard or adjoining yards of my neighbors. So I would really urge the district maintenance department to be more astute at cleaning up school property, and particularly with things like this that are a real nuisance. So that's my message. I hope that the board will get after the maintenance department, and once the snow we've got on the ground melts over the next few days, it'd be a very appropriate time to get the maintenance department out there and pick this crap up so that the taxpayers who live near the school property don't have to fiddle around picking up all this junk themselves. So,
Thank you. I appreciate you coming in, and I'm sure the superintendent will follow up and with the maintenance department because, you know, we know it's not easy to come out on a night like tonight and talk about that, but obviously it's important to you, and we appreciate you coming out and telling us.
okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we are now our student representative. First, I want to introduce Claire Woe. Did I say it right? All right, good. And we have to, I have to administer the oath of office to Claire. So if you would stand, raise your right hand. I do solemnly swear that I will support the Constitution of the United States
I do solemnly swear that I will support the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of New York,
and the Constitution of the State of New York,
and that I will faithfully discharge the duties of Office of Student Representative on the Board of Education
that I will faithfully discharge the duties of the Office of Student Representative of the Board of Education
in the Penfield Central School District according to the best of my ability.
in the Penfield Central School District to the best of my ability.
Congratulations and welcome.
Thank you so much.
Would you like to just take a minute and tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. So I'm Claire Guo. I'm a junior here at Penfield High School. I do a lot of extracurricular activities, and academics is like a really huge part of my life, and I really enjoy coming to school and interacting with my peers and also the teachers around me. and I'm extremely excited to start serving here, and I thank you so much for this opportunity. And if you guys have any advice for me, feel free to let me know.
Well, thank you, and we'll look forward to your updates and reports, and I understand you have a Regents exam tomorrow, is that the case?
Yeah, I have a midterm.
Oh, so we won't keep you too late, but feel free to study for that, obviously. And we
Thank you.
appreciate you being here and being a part of what we do and representing the students.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, thank you.
Claire actually is so prepared, she has a report tonight.
Okay, all right. I was just going to
Okay.
look at that and offer that. Thank you for that. Tip.
I'm here for you.
Okay, so throughout December, all schools in the district held holiday concerts at Penfield High School, and the Friday before holiday break, the students and staff all around Penfield were wearing crazy sweaters. Also, different music ensembles played holiday tunes in the hallways in all of the Penfield schools. In Harris Hill, second graders traveled to Heathwood to sing carols to the residents, and the second graders loved reading in their little tents at Camp Reed. The third graders met their adopted serviceman, Private Evan Sixby, who gave a lesson on gratitude, and Dr. Katie Strong visited first graders to talk about dental health. At Cobbles, the creator of Scrapkins, Brian Yarnish, discussed how students can recycle materials to make unique art pieces. And Indian Landing held their annual holiday sing-along in which students from all grades gathered in the gym to have fun singing Christmas and Hanukkah songs. Scripter students enjoyed the holiday mystery read the Thursday before winter break, where they listened to a story next to a cozy fire shown on the smartboard. At Bay Trail, the 7th graders watched guests from the Rochester Museum and Science Center perform amazing science experiments, and 8th grade quad students walked along the hallways, spreading the holiday spirit by singing Christmas carols. At Penfield High School, 2 students, Emily Vanderbilt and Brandon Ventura, have been selected to perform in the mixed chorus at the prestigious All-Eastern Music Conference. And Model UN traveled to Syracuse, and Penfield had 3 best delegates. On the week of December 19th to the 23rd, Penfield High School celebrated Wellness Week, which focused on health and positive messages. Jonathan Drescher, a 2008 graduate of Penfield High School, also came in to share his personal battle with drug addiction and recovery. He also stopped by Bay Trail as well. In athletics, the state champion PHS girls and boys volleyball team played against the faculty from all Penfield schools in a charity volleyball game, with all benefits going to the Bivona Child Advocacy Center. And a select few Penfield athletes and coaches represented Penfield High School in all Greater Rochester. $1,160 were raised at the Penfield versus Webster faculty game last Friday for Gliding Stars. And lastly, Zach Brown and Frankie Gissendanner represented Penfield in being awarded as Monroe County Wrestling Champions.
Wow. Pretty good for your first time on the job.
Thank you.
Board members, any questions for Claire? And Claire, are you a junior or a senior?
I'm a junior.
Oh, great. Okay. Any questions? Well, we look forward to you joining us and continued updates, and sounds like you'll be very thorough, so we appreciate that and letting us know how things are happening. So
Okay.
thanks again.
Thank you so much.
And make Tom's job easier.
Yeah. I want to stop doing my superintendent report. You
We
take
can
care of all of it.
skip the superintendent report now, but we do have several recognitions that are appropriate this time of year because December is the month when a lot of that happens. So
Sure.
let us know what they are.
Okay, and I'll just say what, just remind you of Mr. Piper, the board president, said, which when you have midterm exams, as much as we're so happy to have you here to be with the board, school always comes first. So good luck tomorrow on your exams as
Thank
we
you
go
so
through
much.
the exam month of January. So superintendent reports, we have student and staff honors. We have Gary Huffman with us for a monthly construction report and the award of the playground contract. I'll give a brief overview of our capital project update, and then I'll turn it over to Dr. Sansucci, who will talk about our budget forecast and reserves plan, as well as the administrative budget report for the following school year, 2017 to 18. PTA reflection contest. This is the third time that I've talked about the PTA Reflections Contest this year, and the reason is because we're very excited to say we have 7 students, 4 high school students, a Bay Trail student, and 2 from Cobbles who have now moved on to the New York State level of competition. And so this is a major piece at Genesee Valley PTA, who really oversees this, and they've made it through Penfield, and they made it through Genesee Valley, and now they're heading off to the state competition. So very exciting for these students. We've only started really PTAs being involved in the Reflections Contest about 5 years ago, and we have more and more entries now every year, and this is just another of those great examples of the partnerships our district has with community and parent organizations, being the PTA, and very excited for these students, and hopefully I'll get to come back and report how well they did at the New York State competition. As mentioned, Claire mentioned, National Volleyball Honors, PHS Girls Volleyball Team, and Coach Andrew Solomon have received national recognition from maxpreps.com. They were one of only 10 teams selected out of 17,000 high schools in the country to receive this honor. Coach Solomon has also been named the Max Preps National Girls Volleyball Coach of the Year. Congratulations to Coach Solomon and the team on these prestigious honors. Really exciting. And Max Preps, I didn't know much about it until last year, but they actually are a nationwide website, a lot to do with high school sports, but you can get real-time updates on just about every athletic event taking place. So it's really cool, but an amazing honor for our girls team. Always excited to talk about the hard work our teachers do outside of the school day. And congratulations to Cobbles literary specialist Ann Krause, who recently had a paper published in conjunction with undersea explorer Michael Lombardi in Current, the peer-reviewed journal of the National Marine Educators Association. The case study focuses on how Miss Krause and Mr. Lombardi brought ocean exploration and the discovery of a new species of fish to students at Cobbles. So really exciting. Again, really sort of some national recognition from one of our teachers in work she's doing both in school, but a lot of that got done outside of school. So very exciting. I am also excited to talk about, we've mentioned before, is the documentary film showing for parents in the community. Penfield will be showing the documentary, I'm Not Racist, Am I?, and facilitating a discussion on this important topic for parents and community members. These screenings are being brought to Penfield in conjunction with Pittsford, Fairport, West Arundequoit, and us. Oh, there we go. So I knew it was 4. I started talking and count at the same time. But the 4 school district superintendents got together last year. Fairport and West Arundequoit showed this film, and enjoyed it, and their community got a lot out of it, and so we're really excited. Again, one of the goals of the board and my own is around partnerships and building partnerships with the like districts around us, and so Mike Perro, Brett Provenzano, and Jeff Crane, the other 3 superintendents, and I have been meeting quite a lot to talk about this film and what we can do. So last Saturday, Dr. Maloney, myself, and 12 teachers and 2 students went over to West Arundequoit, viewed the film, and then took part in a training afterwards on how to facilitate conversations. The picture up here I want to point out really is just to give Frankie more screen time, although he gets quite a lot. Frankie, who also just won the wrestling title, as mentioned by Claire, joined Jeff Crane and I on Good Day Rochester, a Channel 8 show, and Channel 13. Thank you, Nancy Bradstreet, in the audience. So Channel 13 on Good Day Rochester, and really, if you got a chance to watch the clip, really showed 2 superintendents how to handle questions and do a great job. He really made Penfield very, very proud. One of the things he said, though, and I'll give him credit, it's been said before, but he brought it up on air, is the reason we do these Rock to Change events, a student summit on race, bringing this film, is really just to have conversations in order to become comfortable with sometimes uncomfortable conversations. What we found in our Rock to Change events and the student summit on race is our students have very little to no problems talking about race, our high school students. They enjoy getting together with students who look like them and don't look like them and having conversations in a safe environment to really get to know, understand differences. Adults have a harder time. And so I really get inspired when I take a look at our students. The reason this film is here is because our students who have been in the Summit for Race and the Rock to Change events wanted to bring it here. This came from students saying, we're ready, we want people to see it, we want to talk about this. And, you know, it's those little things in this district that I love living here because it inspires you to realize that it's those youth, which is going to be the ones leading our country one day, and they're incredible. And so Frankie being one of them, all the students who are involved, we've got about a dozen or so students who've been very involved, more so sort of on the periphery, and we're really excited to bring this here. Tomorrow night's the showing, 7 p.m. in the auditorium, and then there'll be about 20 to 30 minutes of debriefing afterwards and breakout sessions, and then on Thursday, there are 2 showings at the high school. The film really is designed for high school students, perhaps mature middle school students, but high school students and adults just because of the topic. And the high school students are signing up to see it in what we're referring to as an in-class field trip. So they have to get permissions from their teachers of the classes they're going to miss, and then they sign up. So this isn't being shown to everybody. It's not being forced to, students are having to go. We have students who are signing up. As of this afternoon, we had just over 100 students for each showing, so a little over 200 students who are interested in seeing the film. And I'm excited to report what it looks like at the next board meeting and how it went. Also excited to talk about the first year Penfield has ever had a DECA club, and 2 students qualified for the state competition. Congratulations to Cameron Gage, who was qualified for accounting applications, and Noah Wolfhurst on principles of hospitality in tourism. DECA is Distributive Education Clubs of America, and we're really excited to sort of bring this club back to Penfield and do so well in our first competition. John mentioned December being a holiday giving time of year. I'm not going to read through all of them because we'll be here all night, but in your agenda and people who are watching on the agenda, there's a list of all of the holiday giving that took place across the district. Many of these activities took place, and pictured here are just some students who took part in the Bay Trail Adopt a Snowman project, and it was very, very great. And that is the end of my updates, and we'll turn it over to Gary Huffman for the monthly construction report.
Good evening.
Hi, Gary.
Hi, and thank you for having me tonight. I am here to report on the present construction project we've been doing, which included the emergency bus garage work. At this point this month, we'll be wrapped up. We'll be finishing the punch list. I would expect by February and March, you'll begin to, the district will begin to see final applications for payment from the contractors. So we will be closing down that project here shortly. And the bus garage itself went very well. That work progressed pretty much on schedule, and that too will wrap up this month. We also have coming up the playground project, which we're going to talk about in a minute. And the bids, we did a bid opening in December 21st. We had a very good turnout for that. We had 15 bidders for 3 contracts. The district got the ropes course contractor it wanted, QA Windspeed. So that's the one that Alan had been working with previous to the bid and was anticipating. And then we had a DeFiore Construction won the site bid. Again, a very excellent contractor. And then we have DeAugustino, who actually is on the current project that we're winding down, who also is a very good contractor and has quite a bit of experience working in Penfield School District over many years. So we did very well. We had very good bidders. We turned out under budget, so we have a good fund balance remaining. And we anticipate to start construction when the weather improves, it gets better here. March or April, we'll start on the multi-purpose fields at Bay Trail. And then this summer, what will be done is the abatement, which was, we're doing some flooring abatement in all the schools, and that has to be done during summer. So we anticipate that's work to be scheduled, as I said, March, April, depending on the weather, and finishing up by fall. And then we'll close that out by December of this year.
Sorry, we're also closing out the security project, and you didn't mention that.
Right, that's the current project that we're on. The security project would be closed out here shortly this spring.
Okay, any questions? Go ahead, Mark.
Yeah, one thing you mentioned just sort of put something on my mind. When we did the lighting project, Mark was able to find someone who had won a bid from Pennsylvania to supply some of this, where it didn't have to go out for bid because it was already an approved bid.
Right.
Does that kind of thing come into play for these type events?
It may for the equipment for the playgrounds themselves. So much of the work that is associated with the playground project is site work, right? So we need to level fields, we need to change the topography. There's really no way to do that, so that's what's been bid. We anticipate purchasing the equipment itself through state contract, so that's somewhat the same thing. The lights were purchased on a piggyback contract through out of state. That might be possible for this as well, but I believe that Alan's identified what he wants available on a New York State contract, so it's a little simpler and a little more straightforward.
We do continue to look at that always as we go forward, what opportunities exist for the district, whether it's within New York State or outside of New York State through cooperative purchasing agreements. Absolutely.
It's been a great tool.
It has been. In fact, just yesterday I had invited, a couple months ago, AAC Contracting, who is actually probably the best abatement contractor around. They never get the work because their prices are always higher, just because they just do things right. And they won recently. They just signed the contract last Friday with DASNY, the Dorm Authority, for hazardous material abatement, so asbestos, PCBs, lead. They can now do that under state contract, which is really huge for us, because then we can literally pick them off that state contract and use them and not risk getting some of these, shall we say, dubious abatement contractors. It really strengthened our hand and the hand of the districts.
Another question, since we're talking about that, does that affect any kind of reimbursement rates?
No.
So it's the same matter what?
That's reimbursements, and that end of it is how you get aided for it and pay for it. This end is really how you comply with the law in terms of the public bidding rules and all of that. So it's all the same.
Thank you.
And actually, Alan attended that yesterday, that seminar that was presented by AAC, and we opened it up to all the Monroe County Monroe County facility directors. So we had attendance from many of the districts as well there to hear that message.
Good.
Any other questions on this part of Gary's report? Okay.
Thank you very much.
Am I done? Okay.
I don't think so, because we have, I'm sorry, did we do the award of playground too?
He touched on it. There is an agenda item in the...
Yes, we do have an agenda item on there.
But if you have any questions about that agenda item, I think now would be a great time. If not, we'll release Gary to go about his business.
Okay.
Okay. And thanks for your reports, too. I mean, the pictures and everything, it's really thorough, and that helps us a lot in looking at it, so we appreciate it.
I do too. I appreciate your words. Thank you. And we'll resume it when the playground project starts up, and we'll start reissuing monthly reports with that.
Looking forward to it. Your comment on the lowest bidders reminds me of that line in the Apollo astronauts when they were going to the moon, and he said, you know what, here we are headed to the moon on a spaceship built by the lowest bidders in America. So, thanks again, Gary.
You're welcome. Thank you.
You've got
That's a true story.
the next piece is the 2018 Elementary Additions Project, and we'll walk through some of this. We've talked about this at several of our meetings, and I know Mark and Catherine involved with Facilities Committee have also been through this. But tentative scope, so of the project, elementary classroom additions. The tentative scope here is the elementary classroom additions to address what we have as overcrowding due to increased enrollment and ongoing development in the town of Penfield and more students coming into our schools. So the scope is 12 classrooms in total, 4 classrooms at Scribner Road Elementary School, and possible expansion of core facilities. And when we reference core facilities, we're talking about additional gym, cafeteria space, as well as parking. The same at Cobbles, 4 classrooms and possible expansion of the core facilities. And at Indian Landing, 4 classrooms and the possible expansion of core facilities around, again, parking, bus loop, potential space. The maps are all online. These are tough to see. I know the board has larger maps that were given to them, and also for anybody out there in the audience, and I'll mention at the end, these are all available on the district website, very clean images. But from these images, there are 2 colors, a darker orange and a lighter, sort of more of a yellow. The darker orange is proposed building addition. And then the other color is the tentative addition under consideration. So we really have 2 areas we're looking at, and this is really going to be based on budget. As we finish up and complete the budget, if there, before we get to the vote, we'll have an opportunity to take a look at if we can have and add additional space that's necessary. That's typically the additional gym and cafeteria space. Indian Landing is one of a very unique school. As you've toured Indian Landing, you know it's an older building. It's got multiple layers, different floors, and so a little bit trickier. But the architects working with the district and the facilities committee have done a great job determining where space can be added. You'll notice too that if possible, another addition we're considering is a change in the bus loop, because already at our elementary schools our bus loops are all pretty tight, and making sure there's enough room to bring the buses in. I will point out at Indian Landing is that there is a very large tree, and if you're an Indian Landing parent, you know that tree right near the current bus loop, and our plans are keeping that in consideration to save that tree and work around it. I've already gotten 1 email after the webpage went live of a resident who is very happy to hear that we are being mindful of the trees on the property and what we are able to save, especially those older ones. Scribner has, if you go on the webpage, very detailed pictures of both. There are right now 2 options at Scribner, so it would be sort of an or. So either option 1 or option 2, both add 4 classrooms and add some additional cafeteria and gym space to the existing building at Scribner, which is connected to Bay Trail. And I know those pictures are small. They're all on the web. The board has larger pictures as well. The other part of our capital project, a proposed project, is really around what we've talked about the last few meetings, is our buildings and ground facility and our transportation facility. These are 2 separate facilities. The buildings and grounds department and the transportation department share a small outdated facility on 5 Mile Line Road. The facility was built in 1961 and, like many buildings, has outlived its useful life, and the overall site is too small for both departments. We had far fewer buses in 1961 than we do in 2017. And so 2 new facilities are proposed, and that's why I mentioned that these are 2 separate facilities that happen to be on the same piece of land on 5 Mile Line right now. So the first would be construction of a new buildings and ground facility on district-owned property at 3021 Atlantic Avenue. The facility would occupy about 4 acres of the 39 acres that we currently own. The maintenance staff and their vehicles would use this site. And I want to be really clear, and the board's aware, is that the bus garage would not move to this location. The bus garage, all of our buses, and the fuel pumps all stay where they currently are on 5 Mile Line Road. The only thing that would move would be the buildings and ground department. And at the current bus garage, once the building and grounds department was able to move, we can now construct a new bus garage at its current site on 2075 5 Mile Line Road, across the street and down the road from the high school. Although the district anticipates purchasing some additional buses, overall traffic at this site would be reduced due to moving the maintenance staff and vehicles to a new location. So it would only be people driving in to work at the facility, and then the buses coming and going during those bus pickup times and drop-off times. There is a map here as well this is the tentative proposed site of buildings and grounds on Atlantic Avenue. All of that shaded area inside the black dotted line is the 39-acre parcel that the district owns and has owned since the 60s. And then there up to on the top is the proposed B&G offices and a proposed pole barn for storage. And you can see that the road would come off of Atlantic Avenue and come back relatively far before we built that, doing everything we can to preserve as much property between what we'd like to build and the homes on Atlantic Ave. You'll notice that the bus garage site plan on 5 Mile Line Drive, 5 Mile Line Road, it remains, and that is where a new bus garage and new transportation office would be built on 5 Mile Line Road. This would increase our bus parking on 5 Mile Line Road. It would also increase parking for our bus drivers and staff that are there. You can see the green rectangle all the way to the left of that image is the existing fueling station. The fueling station would not move. The buses would use that fueling station, and the fuel would stay where it currently is. So the other piece that always comes with the capital project is that, as you know, we report on this and the facilities committee goes through this, is that we have to do a building condition survey on a routine basis. And the 2016 building condition survey identified necessary maintenance and infrastructure updates in each of our buildings. And the specific items that would be addressed from our building condition survey would be determined once a budget for the entire project is determined. So if you remember, that building condition survey is a list of sort of prioritized items that should be done, and we would look to see what we could do through the capital project as we complete this budgeting process. Communication, which is always very important. I encourage everybody to go online to see the project information. There's very detailed maps of all of the sites that under consideration. Just go to our webpage. Right on the top link there, on the top tab, it says News and Info. And if you click the News and Info tab, the very first link is to the 2018 Elementary Additions Project. And we encourage people to go there. There's more information there. Everything I just shared verbally is all written out on the webpage. We also just hit my mailbox on Monday is the article included in the January Prestige in the mail this week, and so that goes through all of our site proposals and information about the capital project that we have at this time. We believe strongly around including our stakeholders in conversations. We know that one of our board goals is partnerships, and we try every chance we can to partner with the community and partner with residents here in Penfield. So there is a meeting scheduled just for neighbors who are next to and touch the Atlantic Avenue property. We like to have a conversation with them, show them the site plans, answer any questions they may have, and share information. So that meeting's Thursday at 7 p.m. in A1, the small conference room here at the high school. The neighbors that we had phone numbers for, I called them all personally to invite them to that meeting, and then we followed up with a letter inviting them to that meeting to talk just with the neighbors about that impact. So the focus of that meeting is only going to be around the buildings and ground facility that we are proposing to move to Atlantic Ave. There is a larger public information meeting that will go over all of the proposed capital project. That is at 7 p.m. Next Wednesday, January 18th. That will be in the high school commons right down the hallway, and we encourage everybody to come out to that in the community and hear about the plans, hear details about the proposed project, and share their information with us. There'll be time, obviously, for some Q&A and gathering some feedback. Timeline we've talked about a little bit, the sort of the SEQRA timeline. SEQRA process would begin in April of this year, 2017. In May 2017, the Board of Education would adopt lead agency resolution. In June and in September, I want to point out, we don't have specific dates yet, but we will get those out. In June, there is another public information meeting right before summer. And then in September, there is another public information meeting as we get more information, really have more detail, and can continue to share out with our community and residents. June through October, the board will be considering the public comments. So during board workshops and conversations, we will be reviewing all of the public comments that came in at all of our meetings and anything else that came in through email or phone calls. And then in October, board makes a determination of significance. So if review is complete, the vote date is then scheduled. So it's really where the board reviews all the SEQRA information to determine what the next step is. And then right now, in terms of everything like this, when you look to build, it is a very detailed timeline. And we do know that we've set the sort of a tentative but pretty solid date for a public vote on December 14th, 2017, which feels like a year away, but that goes really fast when we're looking to build. So next steps for everybody, if we boil it down, is public information meeting on Wednesday, January 18th at 7 p.m. in the Commons. We encourage everybody to come out to that. And then we need to, as a district, as a board, and through the Facilities Committee, further define our scope and our budget. So if you notice, the maps that the board has that are online, they're bubbles. There's sort of an overview of where things would go. But before you can actually vote or build anything, we really need to know the exact budget and exactly where rooms would go, how large they would be, and what the space would look like. And then, of course, we are continuing to prepare necessary documents for the SEQRA process. I would just share that when we take a look at all this, there's a lot of work behind the scenes that goes into any of these decisions. To have a capital project, to look at adding classroom space, it really is one of those team pieces. I talk about being Team Penfield, but none of these decisions are being made in a vacuum. We bring in incredible people like construction management with Gary Huffman and the architects and our facilities committee. We talk to principals of the buildings impacted, our transportation director, our facilities director. We bring in quite a few people and have these continued conversations, which is why these public information meetings are so important, because it's the best way that the district can gather feedback, answer questions, and really make sure that we're doing due diligence to listen to stakeholders. And we have to do all that, and we have a vote potentially a year from now. After the vote, it's going to take potentially 2 more years to get through New York State process and SED, and certain home developers who are currently building homes in our district right now, once you put a contract down to the home, in 3 months you're moving in. So I always like to share that timeline with people. When we shared this information out, I had a couple of people say, "Oh, I'm so excited about the new space that'll be here in September." So it's a long process. This is not, there's going to be time for feedback and time for listening and gathering insight from our stakeholder groups and building those partnerships. And so, again, I always like to just remind people that when you build a home, it's typically 3 months from your first check to when you're walking in the door. But in schools, it's 3 years. And so it's a long process. We're doing our due diligence. And we'll continue to be talking about this at just about every upcoming board meeting, I'm sure. That's what I have.
Thank you. I'm going to pick it up. Tonight, in terms of budget, we're going to be reviewing the tentative fiscal stress and budget forecast report for this year, our annual reserves report, and then we'll begin the formal budget presentations with the administrative budget. So in terms of fiscal stress, I think the important thing for us to know here is that there's always stress. Certainly, we all know that. And it's really a continuum. So it's a continuum of fiscal health. You are either more or less stressed as you move throughout the years and throughout the process. And what you want to pay attention to is changes and trends, and be able to determine if the stress is getting greater, if it's getting dangerous, if it's getting better, and be able to include those kinds of considerations into your long-range planning. And part of the confusion, I think, is that there's lots of different ways that you can define fiscal stress. So essentially, can you pay the bills? Do your revenues equal your expenditures? But the one that we've paid the most attention to, the one that matters to us, is that concept of service level solvency. Can we, as a school district, do we have the resources, do we have the wherewithal to provide the level and quality of services that our community wants? Because they need to support our budgets. And without that, if we're delivering a service that doesn't meet their needs, that isn't adequate for what they think they're paying for, that support's going to erode, and you really begin, the whole system comes into question. The comptrollers adopted a fiscal stress monitoring system. It includes 6 environmental factors and 7 financial factors, and they're intended to be a dipstick of how the district's doing. I'm going to go through those because I think they're interesting and it's important for us to understand. But I'd also point out that because of the nature of the way the comptroller has to do it, they're backwards looking. So they wanted a system that they could manage, that they could get data that's easily available to them through financial reports and so on, and be able to produce this fiscal stress report. But it's sort of a report about what has happened. It's like an early warning system that tells you, your car's gone off the cliff, you're in the air. It's a little too late for you to correct your course, but it's probably good information for you to have. So you have a more detailed, and it's probably easier to see in your report. But I just want to go through quickly to show what the comptroller's considering. And in every case of these, this is the Monroe County districts arranged by the greatest change to the less change for whatever the variable is, and Penfield's always in red. So a 4-year average change in property value. You can see that not every district in Monroe County increased, but we did, and we increased about in the middle of the pack. Over those 5 years, our enrollments decreased. We know that in recent years, that trend has changed and turned up. But again, this is looking backwards, so it's showing that. But again, also at the lower end of the spectrum. Changes in budget approval. So this would be a measure for 13 through 16. This is how much did your public support your budget? What was that change in percentage? And Penfield's increased, and it increased about in the middle of the pack. You can see also here that wasn't true across the county. There were districts where they're passing their budgets, but they're eroding in terms of the percentage of folks that are voting in a positive fashion. Graduation rate, we traditionally have had one of the 3 highest in the county, and that continues from 11 through 14. And then a free and reduced lunch percentage. We are one of the lowest free and reduced lunch percentages in the county. So that's the financial indicators. That indicates, and you can see, I think just intuitively, that we're doing pretty good on those financial indicators. There's no immediate sign of financial stress there. I'm sorry, on those environmental indicators. With the financial indicators, we're doing fairly well as well. This is assigned fund balance as a percentage of expenditures. So this is how much of your budget is being supported, what is your assigned fund balance over your expenditures? What's that? How much of your budget is being supported by that fund balance? Again, you can see we're at slightly at the lower end, but about in the middle of the pack. What is your total fund balance? This is the total fund balance that you hold in your district, expressed as a percentage of your expenditures. Again, we are about in the middle of the pack. Operating surplus or deficit and short-term cash and short-term investments as a percentage of general liabilities, again, about the same. And finally, cash as a percentage of our monthly expenditures. So how much cash do you hold in your district for 2015? And you can see again, while we're sort of to the lower end of it, we're about in the middle of the pack. So again, there's really nothing here that would indicate to us that we have any cause for concern. And in fact, that's what the comptroller's fiscal stress monitoring system has reported for us for the last number of years. It was 0 or no designation for all the years of the report. We did pick up 1 point of the 21 possible in 14-15, year ended 14 and 15. But again, that's not cause for concern, and really that had to do with transfers into reserves getting picked up in the system. So it's really irrelevant. But we project it to continue at or near zero, and we project it to remain at zero for the upcoming school year. But again, we're concerned not about looking backwards. That tells us what it looks like going backwards. So we're doing fine, right? Hasn't gone bad. But we're concerned more about looking forward because it's that concept, again, of service level solvency. And this is the board's goal around that. The Penfield Central School will continue a commitment to prudent financial planning, balancing the needs of students, maintaining programs and facilities, and minimizing the impact on taxpayers. That is service level solvency. So how are we doing in that? And really as we go through this, the area of our budget that's going to have the most impact on that as we move forward has to do with staffing and salaries. Because, as you can see here, the majority of our budget, about 75%, consists of salary and benefits for employees. That shouldn't be a surprise to anyone, right? We're a school. We're about teaching kids. We're about teachers in front of kids. We don't have factories. We don't make widgets. We put teachers in front of kids, and so the majority of our budget is that. But it means that matters a great deal to our financial future. In terms of sources of revenue, the majority of our budget, 66%, 65% supported by the real property tax. State aid's a significant component, and everything else. So our appropriated fund balance, our use of reserves, lost book fees, anything else that you could imagine is about 8% of our budget. And what you should realize, or what you should think about in terms of that regard, is that real property tax, which we have some control over, but not a lot because of the property tax cap. We have control over it up to the cap. It is capped, and we have limited control. We have no control over the amount of state aid that we receive. So it means that as we move forward, management of expenses, careful consideration to the expense side of our budget is really what we need to pay attention to. We've done a good job of that in the past. We keep updating this. So now at 9 years, we were a 2% district before 2% was in vogue. We have a 9-year history of an average levy increase of 1.8%, and you can see that in some of those years, just under half of them, the rate, because of growth in the town of Penfield, went down slightly, or in one case a bit more. So what about next year as we look forward? What's that tax cap going to be that controls that 66% of our budget? We don't know yet. Because we don't know what the allowable levy growth based on the rate of inflation is going to be. But we do know the tax base growth factor. So that's just been released, and that is the new bricks and mortar in the community. So not changes in assessment, your house gets reassessed. It's brand new bricks and mortar, new construction in the community. That's an adjustment to your tax cap, because the rationale is, well, if you have new stuff, you should be able to grow your allowable levy a little bit to accommodate that. So 0.48%. Last year, 1.2%. Last year, if you'll recall, we led the league in the county, with the exception, I think, of Victor and Rush Henrietta. But we were high. This year, this is what it looks like across the county. So, this isn't cause for alarm. It just is what it is. Our growth in the community for last year in terms of new bricks and mortar was slightly less than the average. Again, about in the middle of the pack. And you can see the other school districts picked up a little more. So you take all these factors, and in terms of our planning, we want to look forward to, what is our stress level? How concerned do we need to be? So we're going to forecast forward increased state aid. There's more detail on this in your package. We assume no changes to current debt service, because, as you know, while debt service might go up as a result of any potential capital project, net to our budget, we're positive about $1.5 million, and we're trying to plan around that. We want to make sure that that continues. That's good financial planning, I think, for the district, but also here it allows us to say that won't change. We assume that ERS and TRS, while they increase year over year, and I think that will be the trend, are flattened out and not dramatically increased. We're going to continue the use of our ERS reserve, but at a slightly reduced level. I included about $100,000 a year, and we're planning on rolling over from this year into next year because it depends on how this works. We might be able to move some of our tax cap space into next year. So that'll be a budget conversation as we get further into this. We don't know what state aid is yet. We don't know, but we're going to think about that, and we want to signal that now. This is what that looks like then over time. We are positive. We continue positive to budget over the course of the next few years. But remember, it's that year-over-year cycle. We don't assume retirements. I can't assume that. We don't assume changes in staffing levels. We just assume people get more and that benefits increase because that's what they do. And because 75% of your budget is salary and benefits, that inevitably over time drives the budget into a negative situation. We will be obligated to make changes as we move along to make sure that doesn't happen because that's not sustainable. But we at least know that it's not out, that it's farther out into the future. It's 5 years out into the future. You'll recall during the bad years of the tax cap, it was more immediate. State aid was being cut. Those red bars were closer. So it's a moving target. So that's part of that conversation. As we move forward, part of the conversation, because that generates in the near-term surplus, is why do you have one and what do you do with it? Well, certainly you can't have, we cannot operate the district in a deficit situation. We know that. We know that would not be sustainable. So we need to plan on how we manage those reserves and manage that surplus in any given year. You've heard Ray Wagner at your annual audit report talk about that and talk a little bit about how Penfield's handled that. One of the things that's done for us more immediately this year is we were able to refinance part of our debt. And this is a quote from the Moody's rating report. Essentially, I'll read it because I think it's worthy of that. The AA2 rating, which is a very high quality rating of our bonds, reflects management's conservative budgeting practices, which have resulted in healthy reserve position and strong liquidity. The high quality rating reflects a trend of strong financial performance. So Moody's, at least, this independent rater, says we've done pretty well with the management of this through the years. And this is the trend of how that's worked. So the green bars are our expenditures, the black is capital project expenditures, the blue bar is the budget, and the red bar is the revenue budget. So you can see, these are big numbers, but you can see from 0 to 80 million, what that really looks like in the terms of scale of expense. In recent years, we've begun analyzing our budget using the way that the comptrollers analyzed it. As you'll recall, a couple of years ago, we were, as districts are every year, audited by the comptroller. And so we've continued the analysis that they used, a little amended because we wanted it to be slightly more complete than theirs was. They leave some pieces out, but we included everything so that it would tie out to budget, and you can see where we ended up. And essentially what you see is that trend of our variance to budget ending at about 5 and 6%, and then at the end of the day, after transfers, after capital projects, after other uses of reserve, we're at about where we level out at 0, almost nothing. So one of the things that we have committed to, and this was the first year of it, was looking at that every year with an eye towards reducing the variance to the 5% range. So you can see we missed that. We aimed for 5% last year and we hit at 6 again. So we're going to need to pay attention to that in this budget process. That's part of that idea around rolling over a little bit. We'll want to attend to that as we think about it. The guidance for towns, we're aiming for 5. The guidance for towns is 10%. There's no formal guidance for schools, so there's no law, there's no regulation. It's just an opinion, the comptroller's opinion, and he didn't say what was appropriate, he just said that 6 was too much. So we've targeted 5. Our auditor says it should be proportional to our appropriated fund balance. With reserves, that's been 2.5, that's our appropriated, to 5 with reserves over the course of the last few years. So 5 seems appropriate. We're going to continue that goal into this next year. So in terms of the reserves themselves and where they are and what it's used for, there's a little bit of detail here about how that works. This is an analysis of the district's philosophy versus what the comptroller says reserves are and what they're needed for. And really, the message here would be that they line up. We are being thoughtful about saving for future projects, about trying to smooth our budget out, about being planful about what we do. We know, for example, that we're going to be using some capital reserves in this upcoming capital project if we should be successful. So we need to plan on that. We need to put the money away. And that's really what these next couple of slides say. They have a purpose. Districts have been rightly criticized if they have reserves without a purpose. We've been explicit through the years about our purposes, about why we're doing it, and they need to be managed, the comptroller says, and we'd agree that they need to be managed. Our philosophy here, again, lines up with the comptroller's. So what are they? The next several pages in this PowerPoint, it's in your packet in much more detail. One of the reasons I like to have it in the PowerPoint is this gets put on the website along with the entire report, and I think it's detail that's important for people to see. And honestly, the PowerPoint's a little lighter reading, I guess, than the report itself. So I think it's important for people to have access to that. But we do have a bus purchase reserve. We use it every year. It was established in 2011 with a term of 10 years and a maximum deposit of $4.1 million. We have 2 capital reserves, an older one and a newer one that we are continuing to fund. We have an insurance reserve. You'll recall that this reserve in this last budget cycle we dramatically reduced, in part to fund one of our capital reserves, but we did reduce it to come in line with the comptroller's guidance. An unemployment insurance reserve that's very small that we use, that we hold for years when we might have a significant number of layoffs. You'll see when we get to the money analysis, it's very small. And a workers' compensation reserve we established 2 years ago based on a deficit in the workers' compensation plan that we participate in. We've always reserved against tax certiorari claims. Those are claims against the district that can go back many years for people who believe, commercial properties really, that believe they are overassessed. Employee accrued benefits, again, this is very small, but it's for compensated absences for 1 unit. It's only a few $1,000s. But it sets aside money on a current basis for those long-term obligations. And an employee retirement contribution reserve. This is only allowed currently for ERS, for the employees' retirement system. There will be legislation introduced this year, and we'll see how it progresses to expand this to the teachers' retirement system, because it makes little sense to have it for schools at least for half of our folks, and not for the teachers, which for us at least are the larger expense. We'll see if that makes its way through the legislature this year. It's been talked about a lot, but there seems to be renewed vigor. So hopefully we'll see some work in that direction. In the packet and in the next couple slides are the changes over the course of the last year. So how much was used out of each of these reserves, how much was transferred into the reserve. So what was put in, what was put out, how much interest was earned. So the leftmost column where we began, and the rightmost column is where we ended up. So just to look at the bottom of this in terms of reserve fund balance, which consists of those reserves up above. You can see interest is just not a thing these days. But we earned $16,000. We transferred out $822 and in about $1 million, so the net change just about $200,000 in total. That's on that set of reserves. This is the debt service fund, and you'll recall that we used this part of this, $2 million, from this reserve this year, $1 million that we transferred in from fund balance, and $1 million from the reserve itself, to be able to pay down our debt, to prepay debt. So we used $2 million of that this year. $1 million was put in at year end, so the net change in the reserve goes from 5 to 4, a $1 million reduction in that particular reserve. We plan on using some more of that. Some more of this reserve will be used to offset local share of a new capital project. So we're planning to continue the use of this as we move along. It'll be part of the timing of expenses for that capital project. And then, of course, these are the two pieces of fund balance. We call the others are fund balance, and Mr. Maloney will tell you that. These are the pieces we think of, or at least that I think of: the unassigned fund balance and the assigned unappropriated. So. Or I'm sorry, assigned appropriated. So the assigned appropriated is your 4%. That's the 4% you're allowed to, I'm sorry, unassigned is the 4%, and assigned appropriated, totaling $5 million. This is what the reserves without the fund balances look like in total in terms of pie. So you can see that about 55% of it really, bus purchase reserve is a significant portion, debt service fund and capital reserve, those two pieces for debt are really the most significant components. Capital reserves, bus purchase, and the building reserve, the reserve for construction, total about 55%. Recommendations going forward: what are we going to do? What do we plan? In terms of unemployment, again, just to review the level in that reserves, unemployment is a total of $147,000. That employee benefits accrued liability, $48,000. These are small reserves. So we're not proposing any dramatic changes. We maintain that for sudden spikes in need. We'll continue to do that. We'll adjust the employee benefit accrued liability at year end. That's the way that reserve's intended to work. We'll continue to do that. Tax certiorari reserve moves up and down, and we have lots of conversations about this throughout the years. You have in your packet a list of all the outstanding cases. We were overfunded just a couple of years ago in this because we had settled lots. The town had settled lots of cases. Several new cases have come on. That's the sort of the rhythm of this, and we've picked up a number of new ones. So right now we're at 73% of the outstanding liability. That seems to us about right. So we would recommend that we just maintain the current balance. We not try and spend it down or fund it. Rather, just keep an eye on those cases and make adjustments as we move along. Workers' compensation reserve. The workers' compensation fund itself, the cooperative program that we participate in, has been doing very well. They booked a significant deficit a couple of years ago, and we put our reserve up against that deficit. But they've been bringing it down, and we need to adjust our reserve against that deficit. So for this upcoming year, we should use some of this reserve in our budget, either in 1 year or 2 years. We're going to need to figure that out as we move throughout the budget process. We don't have quite enough to cover all of the workers' compensation funds, all of the workers' compensation expense with the reserve for a single year. But we need to decide whether it makes sense to smooth it out over 2 or just to do it in 1. We'll make that conversation as we move. We'll have that conversation with you and the public as we move through this budget cycle. But certainly we want to get it spent down to the outstanding liability. Bus purchase reserve, we're going to have some conversation about this year. This reserve hasn't been touched in quite some number of years. It's about 50% of its total authorized balance. and it was established prior to the tax cap. So one of the things I said in last year's report to you is we really need to look at this. We need to take a step back, figure out if the way we're using it makes sense, think about this a little bit, and think about refunding it and perhaps changing the way we use it in our budget. So I'm foreshadowing that. I want to have that conversation, but we haven't worked our way through that yet. So I can't tell you how that's going to look. We'll work our way through that as we move along. But I do anticipate refunding it and reauthorizing it in this cycle. Retirement contribution reserve, we've been spending that down. We've spent quite a bit of money out of that over the last few years. We want to continue to gradually spend it down, but without doing anything that would destabilize our budget. So we use $250,000 in each of 2 years. We want to look at what's appropriate as we go forward. I forecast about $100,000. I already talked about the debt service fund, where we ended up with that. We did use, we reduced the overall level of funding in the debt service fund by $1 million, and we used $2 million to reduce debt. So that's a good thing. As you recall, it saved us a significant amount of money. But that was use of that fund. We're going to hold the rest of it as we move throughout our planning, because we need to consider and use it as part of our planning for the new capital project. Insurance reserve has changed. That was in reaction to the comptroller. We brought it down to $500,000. We want to maintain it there. I think we should look every year at the level of reserve, eyeball any outstanding issues that we should be worried about, and make a judgment. But I think our recommendation will be that we maintain it at around the $500,000 range. And again, the capital reserve, we've talked a lot about this. There's $12 million available. We're going to use some of that to offset some of the costs that Dr. Putnam talked about in the previous presentation on the upcoming elementary school additions project. So lots going on here, but really I think the thread that goes through all of this is thinking about the future, planning a little bit, and trying to be careful and thoughtful about what we're doing as we move forward. I went through this quickly, though you have a much fuller report. As I said, it's going to be posted on the web and along with the PowerPoint. If there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Questions? Art?
Mark, when you talked about the one reserve, the workers' comp reserve,
Yes.
spending it down, and obviously make sure we don't want to throw the budget out of balance.
Right.
Why can't we just transfer that to the capital reserve, because we know we will have these capital expenditures?
We could. Well, we probably could with voter authorization. We could declare it overfunded, and we could transfer it to the capital reserve. We hadn't considered it because it had been set up for the purposes of workers' compensation. It seemed appropriate for us to use it against those expenses because that's what it was set up for. We can certainly consider that. I think we just want to be careful about, does it make sense in terms of what we said we were setting it up for, and now we're repurposing it. So, and honestly, I think also part of that's going to be a conversation about where are we at in budget this year and how does it make sense. It's our workers' compensation bill is going to be about $600,000, and the reserve overfunding level is about $5 million. So we could spend it all in 1 year. Part of me wants to say, well, it makes more sense to do 250, but again, that I think we just need to work through that as we go through the process.
And the other thing, you talk about the bus reserve and reauthorization. Is there a lifespan for the authorization of these reserves?
There's a lifespan for the funding of it. So the way the proposition is required to be worded, you have to specify in the proposition the maximum lifetime that you can transfer into the reserve. And the maximum lifetime in the law is 10 years. Our reserves are always established as 10 years. But you're obligated also in the proposition to establish a cap. So ours is $4 million, 10 years. Once you hit $4 million, if you did that in the first year, the remaining 9 years don't matter. You cannot transfer more into it. So it's a time limit and also a funding limit. And it's both. It's not either or. You can't exceed either of those. So we are fully funded. We're probably past the time limit too at this point. I would have to look at that. And then of course, the other part of that is the purpose that you established the reserve for. So you need to be clear about what the purpose is. Those three pieces are what matters to that reserve funding.
Thanks.
Carol?
So I appreciate the thorough review of everything. And I also like the fact that you put it on the website for anyone to look at. So I'm just a little bit curious. Do you ever get inquiries from the public regarding the reserves or suggestions?
Occasionally, yeah. You know what? I usually get it around. I will get it around times when we're talking about it in a public way, and the way that typically comes up. I mean, I would anticipate getting those kinds of questions when we start to have these conversations. I'm sorry, about capital projects. Not so much now, because people, I think, will be more. We'll see, but I think people will be more focused in what are you building and where does it go and what does it look like. But as you get closer and as we talk more about our budget and financing, those questions come up, and I do get those questions. I rarely get a random question. It's usually provoked by something. There'll be an article in the paper, or there'll be something, people don't live their lives worrying about schools, and as much as I'm shocked by that, I think they should. But so there's usually something out there in the community, and then I get requests from the press all the time, and that's why I love honestly, from my perspective, that's one of the things I love the best about the website, is we've always been very public about this. We've always put it on the website, and it's just great when you get those calls to be able to say, oh, it's on the website, because once it's not secret, it's not interesting, and so it takes that element out of it, and I think that's just important to building trust and credibility. So yeah, no, I'm happy to do it.
Great, thank you. I appreciate that you do that. So.
And also, I think the fiscal stress that the comptroller has put out there, I mean, even though we always met that, I think it just provides another layer for the public to see.
And I think it's gotten, I mean, he has said this year that he's put out a request, and I haven't kept track of it, so I don't know where it's at, but he's put out a request to revise that, to look at whether that still makes sense. I think it's been interesting. I think that as we've moved through time, it's been interesting to see districts move into fiscal stress. It's certainly gotten a lot of press. And honestly, when you look through it, when you see the districts that the comptroller's report is indicating are in fiscal stress, if you're in the school business, you sort of know their names. I mean, it makes sense with what you see on the ground, with what we understand is happening in the communities, and so I do think it's another spotlight that can be shone, that can sort of illuminate what schools face as we move forward.
And when you have 8 districts in the county running deficit budgets, I mean, compared to what it used to be, I think that's another indicator. So, okay, now to the administrative budget review.
Thank you. This will be briefer because this is this is the administrative portion of our budget, and it's one of the smaller portions of our budget. All our budget presentations, we talked about board goals in the reserves report. We talk about them at the beginning of every budget presentation. I appreciate, I think, that folks that are here and the board probably get tired of me talking about it, but I think it's important because it really does ground the entire process, and it really, your goals really do guide what happens in the schools and therefore in our community. So I think it's just appropriate that we begin with that, and we do tonight begin with the goals of academic achievement and excellence, partnership, and fiscal responsibility. We've been moving through the process fairly quickly. It always seems to go fast, but we've already adopted a budget calendar. You've heard your audit report. Ray came and presented on how we did last year. That's a budget event. And we adopted goals, assumptions, and guidelines. And we've and at the last December meeting, in terms of advocacy and being prepared for the conversations this year, we talked about the foundation aid formula. So Tonight, it's administration. In terms of budget review, it is, as you can see on this slide, about 6% of your budget, and in total, about $5.8 million. It's going up by $17,000 or 0.3%. And this is what it looks like broken up in terms of the components by the functions that that budget supports. So the board, furthest to the left, there really are bars there, but for the Board of Education, the budget, Board of Education, the district clerk, and support of our votes, the largest bars here, of course, are for administration in the building. Those are the principals staffs, the equipment, the supplies, and the travel and conference, and all the things that goes along with their operation of the buildings themselves, as well as administration district-wide that provides guidance on a K-12 basis. So that's the building administration component of the budget. You can see the other components, business office, legal, insurance, and so on. We also include in this budget a transfer to the school lunch fund, which makes sense here, I think, in our world, because that is the administration of the school lunch program. That is Joey Argento, and also the ERS, the Employee Retirement System benefits, is how we calculate that transfer, the general fund in support of the school lunch program. So we include it here. We can break it up. You can slice this up in different ways, and this is what that budget looks like if you slice it up by object. So you can see salaries going up a little bit for certified staff, for non-certified staff about flat, and contractual items going down a bit. So those really are the pieces of the budget that offset. Most of these components in this are, in terms of when you look at it by object, are flat or with very minimal change. That's how you end up with that $17,000 change. You have lots of detail and you see line items and so on, but I just wanted to call out what those significant changes are. In part, we had lots of retirements in this budget. We know, and you know, that principals retired. Marcia Barrett, our former district clerk, was in this line, and she's retired. So it's those components that change in part that you see here, that breakage that helps offset the increases in salary. There is in your detailed budget a decrease in the number of FTEs, of full-time equivalents of non-instructional folks. That's not a decrease necessarily. We're not cutting someone out of this budget. That's someone who moved from the main office to the at the high school to the counseling office. There's reassignment, moving of positions, and because of that, when we get to that portion of the budget, you'll see it bump up by one, it bumps down by one here. We reduced legal costs. We'll see how this turns out. It's talked about in a lot more detail in your budget. You know, we're budgeting below our long-term average at this point, but the last few years have been really positive, and we just have not had the legal costs and settlements that we've seen. So we believe that's going to continue, and so we dropped $10,000 additionally out of the legal budget. We had some reductions in contractual lines throughout the budget as well. I talked about the curriculum development recoding. That's that change. The next budget we'll talk about will be the program budget. So this is the first program budget, or program one. That's the special areas of the instructional program. So special education is the lion's share of that, but also staff development, the counselors, the nurses, school psychologists. These are those. They're not classroom teachers. They're part of certainly an important part of the instructional program, but we talk about them separately. So that'll happen in January. We've tentatively scheduled a board work session for February 7th before the board meeting. So it'll be here. A review of the capital portion of the budget in February. Second meeting in February, on February 28th, is the second portion of the budget. So this is the classroom portions, as well as libraries, clubs, and sports. BOCES in March. Second meeting in March, we're all but done. So that'll be benefits, as well as adding everything together, talking about a proposed budget, taking a look at that first look at revenues and where we're coming up. The board needs to adopt and approve by April 11th so that we can have our public hearing on May 2nd. The vote is May 16th. So those two dates, again, those two important dates. May 2nd is the last formal presentation of the budget, and then May 16th here at the high school is the public vote and election. So that's administration. Are there any questions? Again, you have a much more detailed presentation, but I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Board members, any questions? Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mark. Okay, we're on page 5 of your agenda. We don't have a facilities report, but we do have a general fund budget amendment. The Senate approved grants and aid for the 2016-17 year, as we know, commonly referred to as bullet aid. And this aid is in addition to the state aid that the school districts receive on an annual basis. As part of this year's resolution, the Senate granted $20,000 to Penfield Central School District to be used to purchase fitness equipment to support the district's physical education program. As we have already done, but we want to mention again our gratitude to Senator Funke for his continued support of Penfield schools and the Penfield community. And we'll be able to tell him that in person when we see him at our legislative breakfast. If I could have a motion and second that the Board of Education approve an amendment totaling $20,000 for the 2016-17 general fund budget as shown above, the amounts submitted both as revenue and expenditure items.
Second.
Any questions? All those in favor? Thank you. Thank you, Senator Funke. Our property tax collection status. As of November of each year, the town tax collectors have finalized their property tax collections for the school levy and remitted all funds collected to the school district and submitted all unpaid bills to the county. Attached to our report was the status of the Penfield Central School District tax levy authorized by the board on August 9th, additions and cancellations to the authorized levy, and collections through November 30th, 2016. If I could have a motion and a second that the Board of Education approve the 2016-17 property tax collection status, including the additions and cancellations made to the original approved levy amounts.
Second.
Questions? All those in favor? Thank you. We have an authorization to contract with Campus Construction, as we heard from Gary tonight on our projects. They have submitted for approval a proposal for construction management services for the following upcoming project approved last May 17th. Our asbestos abatement, move and repair the ropes course, a Bay Trail baseball field, and of course our elementary playgrounds. Total budget, including construction incidental costs, is $3,199,000. And their proposal is based on a fixed flat fee of $153,200 for all listed projects, which is approximately 6.3% of the $2.4 million estimated total construction costs. If I could have a motion and a second that the Board of Education authorizes the superintendent to negotiate final terms and enter into an agreement with Campus Construction for the services related to the projects above.
So moved.
Second.
Any questions? All those in favor? Okay. The award of the construction contract for the playground project, as Gary mentioned briefly, as you know, on May 17th, we approved a proposition for $3,199,000, including asbestos abatement at all 6 schools, upgrade physical education. On Wednesday, December 21st of last year at 10:30 a.m., bids were received for a contract for the site work, general trades, and the ropes course. We enjoyed significant competition for this. We had 15 bids for the 3 contracts, and one subsequently withdrew because it was pretty much out of their scope. In addition to the base bid amount, bids were solicited for 4 alternatives, and an award is recommended for 3 of the 4 alternatives. So it's basically, in addition to the recommended contracts awards, costs will be incurred for construction fees, professional services, change orders, and other related costs, and it's expected that the total project cost of all recommended awards will be within the budgeted amount. So this is the step moving forward on our playgrounds and all of the things involved with last May's vote. So you had a budget of $3.199 million, and basically, we are within contract, and based upon the construction manager's review and recommendation, the following low bidders are recommended. And you've heard these names before. DeFiore Construction for the site work, which is $1,006,400. DiAugustino for the general trades of $549,530. And QA Wing Speed for the ropes course of $124,500. Most of this wasn't in your packet because it just came about today. So as Gary updated us, this is the final piece. We'll award this and we'll begin work on this project. If I could have a motion and a second that the construction contracts be awarded as set forth above. Any questions on that? All those in favor? Thank you. Traffic study. We're currently in the planning and development process for a potential capital project known as the 2018 Elementary Additions Project to address space needs at the elementary schools, as we've heard earlier. Classroom additions at Cobble, Scrivener, and Indian Landing to address crowding and provide for future growth, which is important. Necessary improvements to our existing infrastructure and a facility for Building and Grounds Department on Atlantic Ave, and replacing of the existing 1961 vintage bus garage on 5 Mile Line Road. It's anticipated that we will begin the SEQRA planning process for this project in the next few months. Accordingly, the construction manager for the district has submitted quotes for a traffic study, and quotes were solicited from 3 engineering firms, SRF Associates, Stantec, and Fisher. SRF had a bid of $7,800, Stantec no response, and Fisher Associates $7,000. After looking at this, it is recommended the award to SRF is recommended. Though Fisher Associates provided a lower response, SRF has provided added value by their extensive knowledge to us and the community. We have completed many studies, and we'd like to move ahead with this. And their SRF Associates is at Winton Road Place, and the total base bid is $7,800. So it's a traffic study. We're required to do this, I believe, Mark, as part of the process, and it's an important thing to do. If I could have a motion and a second that the Board of Education authorize the award as detailed above, and further authorize the superintendent of schools to execute any necessary documents.
So moved.
Second.
Any questions on the traffic study? All those in favor? Okay.
If I could,
Yes,
I just want to add one thing, because it's, in terms of requirement around this, I think we're going to be required by, the law would require us to do a traffic study if we intend to add more than 100 vehicles to an intersection in any hour. We are vastly below that, as you know. And so I think it's important for us to say that, because we know that we will have concerns. We want to be able to address any concerns that we have as fully and as forthrightly and as openly and honestly as we possibly can. And so we feel that it's money well spent for us to be able to have the information that we'll gather from this, and be able to provide those answers to folks who might be concerned. Because, as you know, part of our proposal, that project on Atlantic Avenue, traffic on Atlantic Avenue is a concern. And we, because of timing and so on, don't believe we'll be adding to that, but we want to be able to say that with something other than just our thinking it. So.
Great, thanks for sharing that. And also, if you recall, traffic was the #1 concern on the Shadow Pines Moratorium Committee that we reported on several times. And you can only expand roads so far through eminent domain. So I think that's the right thing for us to do, obviously. And I'm sure there'll be a lot of studies going down the road as more developer applications come in and Shadow Pines gets figured out, so. Okay. Policy review, we have a second reading and approval on district investments, administrative guidelines regarding investment policy, code of ethics for board members and district personnel, disclosure of interests in contracts and resolution, and students with disabilities. If I could have a motion, a second, that the policy 5220 district investments, 5220 R1 administrative guidelines regarding investment policy, 6110 code of ethics for board members and all district personnel, 6110 F1 disclosure of interests in contracts and resolution, and 7222 students with disabilities be approved as presented.
Second.
We had 2 moves and 2 seconds. That's great. We'll take one of each. Any comments on these? We didn't have any public comments on any of these. No, none at all. So, okay. All in favor? Thank you. Okay, President's remarks. We've asked everybody to join us for the Monroe County School Boards Association Legislative Breakfast, February 11th at 9 a.m., so please let Sharon know. The governor's been on his tour, and, well, he's been on his tour. The legislature's been working, and between the Assembly and Senate, on the first day, there were 16 education bills introduced. So we're not sure what they are yet, but we will soon hear about those. Also, we have our Monroe County School Board's Albany Advocacy Trip, March 6th and 7th, to visit with our legislators. And again, please let Sharon know if you can make that. Last week, I had the privilege with the officers of Monroe County School Boards Association to meet with the Vice Chancellor Regent Andrew Brown, who's from Rochester, and it was a great meeting. Wade Norwood called in sick. He was supposed to be there as well, but he's very optimistic, at least with things relating to Jim's area of work, Common Core, that things are working out. They feel they're getting a lot of input from the public and from teachers and school districts. Again, the big question mark is they can propose everything they want. They're separate under the Constitution, but if the budget does not deliver money, they cannot do anything. So that's why they try to work with the legislature, and his message to us was continue our work with our state legislators to let them know that what our needs are and the needs of the state education department. I asked a specific question about how he felt the relationship would be with the pending new Secretary of Education for the United States, and if there was a way to separate New York a little bit more than we have done in the past. And he said probably not, because there's so many things that are linked, as our staff knows, from the feds to this. So, but they really don't know what to expect. And so in line with that, I'm not sure if all of you responded. There was a survey that the New York State School Boards Association put out relative to the President-elect Trump nominating Betsy DeVos to serve as Secretary of Education. So yesterday, a letter went out from Tim Kramer, Executive Director of our state association, to Senator Schumer and Senator Gillibrand, and copies to Senator Lamar Alexander, I believe, chairs that. That as this is becoming, coming up, more than 400 school board members across the state responded to the survey, and in short order, 86% were really opposed to her due to her qualifications, background, support for other issues, and I think you'll see this is one of the more controversial nominations that will go out there if you're reading what's going on. But more importantly, and you can all see copies of this, but this was mailed out yesterday, and it was in the news today. It'll probably be in the news tomorrow. But our members really oppose this due to the fact that we don't feel she possesses the qualifications necessary to do the job. And this is a big job, Secretary of Education. We've had professionals in that position before, and we have someone who's a known advocate of vouchers and charter schools, which is not in the best interest of kids as far as we know it. So they did attach a report, and so we're making our message known, and I think the hearing started today. I think you'll hear more about her nomination than many others through this. And today, the New York Times had a great story on her background and involvement in several areas. So that's, and thank you for those of you who responded to the survey. There was some, I think the only piece of the question that came back, that there were, in one of the questions, 29% felt that that was the only positive, the 29% undecided on one question, but for the most part, the positives were 8% or less on all the categories that were asked. But some people were optimistic in the fact that will she work with us, but 29% were undecided on that. So, so there's a lot to come in regard to this. So I just thought I'd mention that and let you know what's happening in that realm of the world. Any questions on that at all? Okay, that being the case, I look for a motion to adjourn at 8:58 p.m. Any questions, comments? All those in favor? Thank you. Meeting adjourned.